Elena Vasquez knelt beside the glowing blue flowers in her garden. The morning sun of Kepler 442c cast long shadows across the research station. These flowers were special. They talked to the small animals in the forest using chemicals. Elena had been studying them for 8 years now. "Mom, look what I found." 12-year-old Sophia ran toward her, holding something in her cupped hands. Her twin sister Maria followed close behind. Elena smiled as Sophia opened her hands to reveal a tiny creature that looked like a mix between a butterfly and a fish. Its scales caught the light and threw rainbow colors everywhere. "It's beautiful," Elena said. "But remember what we learned about the local animals? Don't touch them without gloves," Maria said, rolling her eyes. Sophia never listens. "I had gloves on," Sophia protested, showing her protected hands. Elena laughed. Her daughters had grown up on this frontier world. To them, the glowing forests and floating jellyfish creatures were normal. They had never seen Earth. This was their home. Marcus emerged from the main lab building, wiping his hands on a towel. Her husband looked tired but happy. They had been working together on a new project. The plants here could help solve food problems back on Earth. The way they worked with animals could change farming forever. "The morning samples are ready," Marcus said, kissing Elena's cheek. "Want to see something amazing?" Elena followed him, inside while the girls ran off to play. The lab was filled with growing tanks and computers. Marcus led her to a microscope. "Look at this," he said. Elena peered through the lens. Tiny plant roots were reaching out to touch animal cells. Where they met, both began to glow brighter. The plant was feeding the animal, and the animal was protecting the plant. "If we can understand this process," Marcus said, "we could grow crops that feed themselves and fight their own diseases." Elena nodded, excited. This could help millions of people. They had sent their research to Earth last week. Soon, other scientists would come to help them. A shadow passed over the lab windows. Elena looked up. The shadow was too big to be one of the local flying creatures. It moved wrong too, like it was made of metal instead of flesh. "Did you see that?" she asked Marcus. He was already at the window. "That's not one of ours. No ships are scheduled to arrive for another 3 months." More shadows passed overhead. These were definitely ships, but they looked nothing like human designs. They were tall and thin like needles, made of something that looked like crystal. The crystal surfaces reflected the sun in strange ways. "Get the girls," Elena said, her voice suddenly tight with worry. Marcus was already moving. "Sophia, Maria, come inside now." The girls heard the serious tone in their father's voice. They ran toward the lab building, but before they could reach the door, beams of pale light shot down from the ships above. The beams hit the ground around the girls. Where the light touched, the grass and soil began to change. It turned gray and crumbly like it was being drained of life. "Run!" Elena screamed. Sophia and Maria tried to run, but the beams moved to follow them. The light surrounded them in a circle. Elena watched in horror as her daughters began to slow down, like they were moving through thick water. More beams came down from the ships. One hit Marcus as he ran toward the girls. He stopped moving entirely, frozen in place like a statue. Elena ran toward them, but another beam cut her off. She dove sideways, rolling behind a metal storage container. The beam missed her by inches. Where it hit the container, the metal began to rust and fall apart. From her hiding spot, Elena watched the crystal ships land. Creatures came out of them. They were tall and thin like their ships, made of what looked like living crystal. Their bodies caught the light and threw it back in sharp, painful flashes. The creatures moved toward Marcus and the girls. Elena wanted to run to help them, but she knew the beams would catch her too. She had to think. She had to find another way. One of the crystal creatures touched Marcus with a long, needle-like finger. Marcus began to glow with the same pale light as the beams. Elena could see through his skin. She could see his bones, his blood, everything inside him becoming visible. "No," she whispered. The creature made a sound like breaking glass. Other creatures answered with similar sounds. Elena realized they were talking to each other. They dragged Marcus and the girls toward their ships. Elena followed, staying hidden, behind trees and rocks. She had to do something. She had to save her family. The crystal creatures brought her family to the largest ship. Elena crept closer, using the forest for cover. She could hear the creatures talking in their glass-breaking language. She could see Marcus and the girls inside a cage made of the same crystal material as the creatures' bodies. Elena reached for her communicator to call for help, but when she pressed the button, nothing happened. The device was dead. Whatever those beams were, they had damaged all the electronics in the area. She watched helplessly as the creatures began to do things to her family. They used tools that looked like crystal needles. Where the needles touched Marcus's skin, his body began to change. Parts of him became transparent, like glass. Elena covered her mouth to stop herself from screaming. She understood now. These creatures were not just capturing her family, they were changing them, breaking them down, studying them. Sophia looked around the crystal cage with wide, frightened eyes. She saw Elena hiding in the forest. Elena put her finger to her lips, telling Sophia to stay quiet. Sophia nodded and looked away, pretending she hadn't seen her mother. The crystal creatures worked on Marcus for what felt like hours. Elena watched every horrible moment, burning the images into her memory. When they were done with Marcus, they moved him to a different container. He was still alive, but he looked different, smaller, weaker. Then they started on Sophia. Elena bit her hand until it bled to keep from screaming. She memorized every detail of the creatures' faces, their tools, their methods. She would remember this, all of it. The creatures worked through the day and into the night. Elena stayed hidden, watching, learning, hating. When morning came, the creatures packed everything into their ships, her family, their research, even samples of the local plants and animals. As the ships prepared to leave, Elena ran back to the lab. She had one chance. The emergency shelter was built deep underground. If she could reach it, she might survive, whatever else these creatures planned to do. The crystal ships rose into the sky just as Elena sealed herself into the underground shelter. Through the shelter's cameras, she watched the ships fire their beams at the entire planet. The forests, the research station, everything on the surface began to turn gray and crumble. The creatures were not just taking her family, they were taking everything alive on the planet. Elena sat in the dark shelter and wept, but her tears were not just from sadness. They were from rage, pure, burning rage that felt like it could melt steel. She would survive. She would learn about these creatures, and someday, somehow, she would make them pay for what they had done to Marcus, to Sophia, to Maria. The crystal creatures had made a mistake. They had left one human alive, and that human would remember everything. 15 years had passed since the crystal creatures took Elena's family. She sat in her apartment near the University of New Geneva, surrounded by books and computer screens. Her walls were covered with pictures, charts, and notes about the creatures she now knew were called Zephyrians. Elena looked different than she had on Kepler 442c. Her hair was streaked with gray, and her eyes had a hardness that made people uncomfortable. She had earned 6 different university degrees in those 15 years: xenobiology, quantum physics, military strategy, Zephyrian language studies, advanced chemistry, psychological warfare. Her teachers thought she was brilliant, but strange. She learned faster than anyone they had ever seen, but she never seemed happy about her success. She studied like her life depended on it, because it did. Elena picked up a piece of Zephyrian crystal from her desk. Human soldiers had recovered it from a destroyed Zephyrian scout ship. The military let her study it because she was the only human expert on Zephyrian technology. The crystal was beautiful in a cold way. It felt warm in her hand and hummed with energy. Elena knew this single piece of crystal was connected to every other Zephyrian in the galaxy. They shared thoughts through these crystals. They were all one mind spread across many bodies. That gave her an idea. Elena opened her computer and began typing. She was writing a research paper about Zephyrian communication, but she was not writing it for other scientists. She was writing it for herself. Every word brought her closer to understanding how to hurt them. The Zephyrians saw the universe in simple terms. Things were either useful or useless. Organic life like humans was useless. It was messy and unpredictable, so they cleaned it up. They turned living things into raw materials for their machines. Elena had read reports from other worlds the Zephyrians had visited. Always the same pattern. They arrived, studied the local life for a few days, then harvested everything. Plants, animals, people. All of it became fuel for their crystal technology. They had been doing this for thousands of years. Entire civilizations were gone because of them. The Zephyrians kept records of their harvest totals like humans kept track of crops. Elena's computer chimed. She had received a message from the military. General Harrison wanted to meet with her. Tomorrow. He probably wanted another report about Zephyrian weaknesses. Elena had been giving the military information for years, but she never told them her real discoveries. They wanted to know how to fight Zephyrians in battle. Elena was learning how to destroy their entire species. The next morning, Elena sat in General Harrison's office. The general was a kind man who reminded her of Marcus. That made her hate him a little. Dr. Vasquez, Harrison said, we need your help. Intelligence reports say the Zephyrians are planning a major attack, possibly on Earth itself. Elena nodded. She had expected this. The Zephyrians were running out of frontier worlds to harvest. Soon they would move toward the center of human space. What do you need from me? Elena asked. We need better weapons, better defenses, something that can stop their harvesting beams. Elena almost laughed. Harrison still thought this was a normal war. He thought humans could fight Zephyrians with bigger guns and stronger shields. General, Elena said, what would you do if someone killed your family? Harrison looked surprised by the question. I would want justice, of course, but we have laws, proper procedures. No, Elena interrupted. What would you really do? If someone took your children and dissolved them alive for raw materials, what would you do? Harrison was quiet for a long moment. I suppose I would want revenge. Exactly. And that is what the Zephyrians have never faced. True revenge. They see organic life as a resource to be harvested. They do not understand that we can hate them back. Elena stood up. I will continue my research, General, but I suggest you prepare Earth's defenses. This war is going to get worse before it gets better. Elena left the general's office and returned to her apartment. She had work to do. That night, Elena sat in her laboratory. It was hidden in the basement of the apartment building. The landlord thought she was growing vegetables down there. In reality, Elena was growing something much more dangerous. She had combined Zephyrian crystal technology with earth fungus. The result was a hybrid organism that could spread like a disease through the Zephyrians' shared consciousness network. Elena watched the hybrid organisms grow in their tanks. They looked like purple mushrooms shot through with crystal threads, beautiful and deadly. The key was quantum entanglement. The Zephyrians' crystals were all connected across space instantly. If Elena could introduce the right frequency into their network, it would spread to every Zephyrian at once. She had been testing different frequencies for years. Most did nothing. A few caused mild confusion in Zephyrian test subjects. But Elena was looking for something specific. She wanted a frequency that would cause complete neural breakdown. Elena opened her notebook and reviewed her progress. She had identified 847 Zephyrian worlds. Each world had millions of Zephyrians connected to the network. If her plan worked, she could reach them all at once. But first, she needed live test subjects. Elena opened a star chart on her computer. She had been tracking Zephyrian ship movements for months. There was a pattern. Scout ships traveled alone on specific routes. If she could intercept one of those ships, she could capture its crew. Elena had been learning more than just science in her years of study. She had also learned about hunting. 3 weeks later, Elena sat in the pilot seat of a modified cargo ship. She had bought the ship with money from her research patents. The modifications had cost her entire savings, but they were worth it. The ship was invisible to most sensors. It was fast and quiet. Most importantly, it was equipped with Zephyrian-style harvesting beams. Elena had built the beams herself, using salvaged crystal technology. She knew it was ironic. She was using Zephyrian weapons to hunt Zephyrians. Her sensors detected the target, a single Zephyrian scout ship, exactly where her calculations said it would be. The ship was small, probably carrying only 3 or 4 crew members. Perfect for testing. Elena powered up her harvesting beams and moved to intercept. The Zephyrian ship tried to run, but Elena's modifications made her faster. The harvesting beams locked onto the Zephyrian ship. Elena could see the crystal creatures inside, frozen by her weapons just like Marcus and the girls had been frozen years ago. But Elena was not going to dissolve these creatures. She had other plans for them. Elena brought the Zephyrian ship into her cargo bay and put on her environmental suit. The Zephyrians breathed a different atmosphere than humans. Elena had learned their biology very well over the years. The 3 Zephyrians were conscious but unable to move. Elena could see fear in their crystal faces. Good. She wanted them to be afraid. "Hello?" Elena said in perfect Zephyrian language. The creature's eyes widened in surprise. "My name is Elena Vasquez. You killed my family 15 years ago on Kepler 442c. I have been studying your species ever since." Elena activated her recording equipment. She wanted to document everything. "Today we are going to run some tests. Do not worry. I will not dissolve you like you dissolved my daughters. That would be too quick." Elena picked up her first experimental device. It was designed to disrupt Zephyrian neural networks on specific quantum frequencies. "We are going to find out exactly how your shared consciousness works. And then, we are going to break it." The Zephyrian in the middle tried to speak. Elena had disabled their ability to communicate with their home network, but they could still talk to each other. "You cannot win," the creature said. "We are eternal. We are everywhere. You are just one small organic." Elena smiled. It was not a kind smile. "You are right. I am just one human. But I am a human who has lost everything. And I have had 15 years to think about revenge." Elena activated her device. The Zephyrians began to scream. Elena floated in zero gravity inside her secret laboratory. She had built it inside a hollowed-out asteroid in the belt between Mars and Jupiter. No one knew she was here. No one could find her unless she wanted them to. 3 years had passed since she began capturing Zephyrian scouts. Elena had tested 47 different quantum frequencies on dozens of test subjects. Each test taught her more about how Zephyrian consciousness worked. The latest test subject hung in a crystal restraint system Elena had built. The Zephyrian was still alive but barely conscious. Elena had been very careful to keep it alive. Dead Zephyrians could not feel pain. Frequency 2847.3 caused temporary paralysis. Elena spoke into her recorder. Duration, 4 minutes and 37 seconds. No permanent damage to neural pathways. Moving to frequency 2848.1. Elena adjusted her quantum disruption device. The machine was beautiful in its own deadly way. She had built it from salvaged Zephyrian technology, combined with human quantum computers. It could generate any frequency she needed. The Zephyrian tried to speak as Elena prepared the next test. Its voice was weak and broken. "Please," it said in its crystal chime language. "We did not know you could feel. We did not know organics could think." Elena paused. This was the first time any of her test subjects had said something like this. She looked at the creature with cold interest. "You are lying," Elena said. "You observed my family for hours before you dissolved them. You saw Sophia cry. You saw Marcus try to protect the girls. You knew we could think and feel." "We thought it was just programming," the Zephyrian whispered. "Like the sounds machines make when they break. We did not understand it was real." Elena felt her anger grow hotter. "My daughter looked right at me before you started dissolving her. She was 12 years old. She was afraid. And you thought that was just programming?" The Zephyrian said nothing. Elena activated the next frequency. Test. The Zephyrian scream echoed through the laboratory. After the test, Elena made notes in her journal. The frequency had caused the creature to lose connection with its body for 6 minutes. Interesting, but not what she needed. Elena needed a frequency that would cause complete neural collapse. Not temporary paralysis, not confusion, death. She looked at her progress charts on the laboratory wall. She had mapped the Zephyrian consciousness network completely. It was like a vast web connecting every member of their species across the galaxy. Information traveled instantly from one Zephyrian to any other through quantum entanglement. The network was their greatest strength. It made them incredibly efficient at coordinating their harvest operations. But Elena knew it could also be their greatest weakness. If she could find the right frequency, she could send a signal that would spread through their entire network instantly. Every connected Zephyrian would receive the signal at the same moment. Elena opened her computer and reviewed her hybrid organism research. She had been growing the crystal fungus hybrids for months now. They could integrate into Zephyrian technology without being detected. They looked like natural crystal formations to Zephyrian sensors. The hybrids were the key to her plan. She could use them to plant her death frequency directly into the Zephyrian network. Once inside, the signal would spread faster than the Zephyrians could react. Elena began preparing her next test. This time she would try something different. Instead of testing individual frequencies, she would test a cascade effect. One frequency that triggered another, then another, building into something unstoppable. She attached monitoring equipment to the Zephyrian test subject. The creature was barely conscious now after weeks of testing. Elena almost felt sorry for it. Test 341. Elena spoke into her recorder. Attempting quantum cascade sequence starting with frequency 29991.7. Elena activated her device. The first frequency hit the Zephyrian's neural network. The creature twitched but did not scream. Good. The frequency was spreading through its system without causing immediate pain. Then the cascade began. Elena watched her monitors as the frequency changed, spreading through the creature's crystal matrix like a chain reaction. The Zephyrian's eyes went wide. It tried to speak, but no sound came out. The cascade reached the creature's connection to the greater network. For a moment, Elena saw readings that suggested the frequency was trying to spread beyond this single Zephyrian. Then the test subject died. Elena stared at the silent creature for a long moment. Then she smiled. She had found her weapon. Elena spent the next 6 months perfecting the cascade frequency. She tested it on every remaining Zephyrian in her laboratory. The results were always the same. Complete neural collapse within seconds. Death followed within minutes. But Elena needed to test something else. She needed to know if the frequency would actually spread through the Zephyrian network to other individuals. For that test, Elena needed to capture 2 Zephyrians who were still connected to their home network. Elena modified her hunting ship and set out to find a larger target. She tracked a Zephyrian patrol ship with 5 crew members. These would be her final test subjects. The capture went smoothly. Elena had become very good at hunting Zephyrians over the years. She brought all 5 creatures back to her asteroid laboratory. Elena prepared her cascade device one final time. She would test it on one Zephyrian while monitoring the others. If her theory was correct, the frequency would spread through the network and kill all 5 creatures simultaneously. Final test, Elena spoke into her recorder. If this works, I will be ready to deploy the weapon on a larger scale. Elena activated the device. The first Zephyrian died within seconds, just as expected. But Elena was watching the other 4 creatures. She saw the exact moment the cascade frequency reached them through their shared network. Their crystal bodies began to resonate with the deadly frequency. One by one, they collapsed. All 5 Zephyrians were dead within 30 seconds. Elena had proven her weapon would work. Now she needed to build it on a scale that could reach every Zephyrian in the galaxy. Elena began construction of her final device. She called it the Quantum Cascade Generator. It was enormous, filling an entire chamber of her asteroid laboratory. The machine combined human quantum computers with Zephyrian crystal technology and Elena's hybrid organisms. The generator could broadcast her cascade frequency across interstellar distances using the same quantum entanglement principles that connected the Zephyrian network. Elena had essentially built a transmitter that could speak their language, but she needed more than just the generator. She needed to place her hybrid organisms at key points throughout Zephyrian space. The organisms would act as amplifiers, boosting her signal and ensuring it reached every member of their species. Elena began planning the largest infiltration operation in human history. She would need to visit dozens of Zephyrian worlds, plant her organisms in their communication networks, then return home to activate the generator. It would take years to complete, but Elena had time. She had waited 15 years already. She could wait longer. Elena looked at a picture of Marcus, Sophia, and Maria on her laboratory wall. It was the only personal item she had kept from their old life. "I am almost ready," she whispered to the picture. "Soon they will pay for what they did to you." Elena began loading her ship with hybrid organisms. Each one was carefully designed to integrate into Zephyrian technology without being detected. They would spread through the network like seeds, waiting for Elena's signal. When she activated the quantum cascade generator, every hybrid organism would receive the signal simultaneously. They would convert it into the cascade frequency and inject it into the local Zephyrian network. The frequency would spread from organism to organism, from network to network, until it reached every Zephyrian in the galaxy. Elena estimated the entire process would take less than 4 minutes. In 4 minutes, she would make the Zephyrians extinct. Elena sealed her ship and prepared for the long journey into Zephyrian space. She had a species to destroy. But first, she allowed herself one moment of doubt. Was this the right thing to do? Was she becoming a monster worse than the creatures who had killed her family? Elena thought of Sophia's face as the Zephyrians began to dissolve her. She remembered Marcus trying to protect the girls with his last breath. She thought of the billions of other families the Zephyrians had destroyed over the centuries. Elena pushed the doubt away. This was not murder. This was justice. The Zephyrians had taught her that some things in the universe were useful, and some were waste. They had decided that human families were waste. Now Elena would teach them that they were wrong. Elena drifted through the darkness between stars in her modified ship. She had been traveling through Zephyrian space for 2 years now, moving like a ghost between their worlds. Her ship's stealth systems made her invisible to their sensors. To the Zephyrians, she was just empty space. She had already visited 37 Zephyrian worlds. On each one, she had planted her hybrid organisms in their communication networks. The crystal fungus creatures grew slowly, spreading through the Zephyrian systems like a disease they could not detect. Elena checked her star charts. Only 10. More worlds to go. Then she could return to her asteroid laboratory and activate the quantum cascade generator. The current target was Zeph Prime Delta, a major communication hub that connected 43 other Zephyrian worlds. If Elena could plant her organisms here, she could reach nearly half their empire with a single deployment. Elena piloted her ship toward the planet's dark side. Zeph Prime Delta looked like a giant crystal from space. The entire surface was covered in communication towers that reached up into the atmosphere. Streams of energy flowed between the towers like lightning. Landing would be dangerous. The planet was heavily defended, but Elena had learned to move through Zephyrian defenses without being seen. She had become very good at being invisible. Elena's ship touched down in a valley between 2 massive communication towers. She could feel the quantum energy flowing around her. It made her skin tingle and her teeth ache. No human had ever been this close to a major Zephyrian installation. Elena put on her environmental suit and gathered her equipment. The hybrid organisms were stored in special containers that looked like normal Zephyrian crystal formations. Even if a Zephyrian found them, they would appear to be natural growths. Elena made her way toward the nearest communication tower. The structure was beautiful in an alien way. It was carved from a single piece of crystal that stretched kilometers into the sky. Energy patterns flowed through the crystal like blood through veins. Elena found what she was looking for at the base of the tower. A junction box where dozens of quantum communication lines came together. It was the perfect place to plant her organisms. Elena opened her container and carefully removed one of the hybrid creatures. It looked like a small crystal flower with purple veins running through it. She pressed it against the junction box and watched as it began to integrate with the Zephyrian technology. The organism sent out tiny crystal threads that connected to the communication lines. Within minutes, it was fully integrated into the system. To any Zephyrian who might scan the area, it would look like a normal part of their network. Elena planted 3 more organisms at different locations around the tower. Then she moved to the next tower and the next. By dawn, she had planted over 50 organisms across the planet's communication network. As Elena prepared to leave Zeph Prime Delta, her sensors detected something unexpected. A massive fleet of Zephyrian ships was gathering in orbit above the planet. Elena had seen nothing like it in all her years of studying their species. Elena hid her ship in the shadow of an asteroid and watched the fleet through her telescopes. There were thousands of ships, harvest vessels, communication ships, and something Elena had never seen before. Massive ships that pulsed with quantum energy. Elena recorded everything. This was important. The Zephyrians were planning something big. Over the next 3 days, Elena watched more fleets arrive. Ships came from all across Zephyrian space until the area around Zeph Prime Delta was filled with their vessels. Elena estimated there were over 50,000 ships in total. Then Elena intercepted their communications and understood what was happening. The Zephyrians were preparing for a final harvest. They were going to attack Earth. Elena felt a cold fury settle in her chest. The creatures were planning to do to Earth what they had done to Kepler 442c. They would dissolve every human on the planet and convert their bodies into raw materials. But Elena also realized something else. This gathering represented the largest concentration of connected Zephyrians in their history. When they coordinated their attack on Earth, every Zephyrian in the fleet would be linked to their communication network. It was the perfect opportunity. Elena sent a coded message to the human military, warning them about the coming attack. But she did not tell them her real plan. The humans would try to stop her if they knew what she intended to do. Elena spent the next week planting organisms on the remaining Zephyrian worlds. She worked faster now, knowing that time was running out. The Zephyrians were moving their fleet toward human space. Finally, Elena planted her last organism on a remote Zephyrian outpost. Her network was complete. 847 Zephyrian worlds, all connected by her hybrid creatures. When she activated the quantum cascade generator, the death frequency would spread to every member of their species within minutes. Elena began the long journey back to her asteroid laboratory. Along the way, she monitored human military communications. The news was bad. Zephyrian advance scouts had already attacked 3 human colonies. The main fleet would reach Earth within days. Elena pushed her ship's engines to maximum speed. She had to get home before the Zephyrians launched their final attack. Elena reached her asteroid laboratory just as the first reports came in from Earth's defenses. The Zephyrian fleet had arrived in the solar system. They were beginning their assault on humanity's homeworld. Elena rushed to her quantum cascade generator. The massive machine filled an entire chamber of her laboratory. Screens showed the status of her hybrid organisms across Zephyrian space. All connections were active and ready. Elena's hands shook as she began the activation sequence. After 18 years of planning, she was finally ready to take her revenge. On her screens, Elena could see the battle for Earth beginning. Human ships fought bravely, but they were outnumbered 1,000 to 1. The Zephyrians were already beginning to deploy their harvesting beams toward Earth cities. Elena thought of Sophia and Maria. She thought of Marcus. She thought of all the families who would die if she failed. Elena entered the final activation code. The quantum cascade generator began to hum with power. Elena's hybrid organisms across Zephyrian space received the signal simultaneously. Each organism began to convert the signal into the cascade frequency, injecting it into the local Zephyrian network. Elena watched her monitors as the frequency spread from world to world, network to network. Red lights appeared on her display as each Zephyrian world went silent. The frequency reached the fleet attacking Earth within 90 seconds. Elena watched through intercepted communications as the Zephyrian ships suddenly stopped their attack. Their crews were dying. Elena felt no satisfaction, no joy, only a cold sense of completion. Within 4 minutes, every red light on Elena's display was active. 847 Zephyrian worlds had gone silent. The cascade frequency had reached every member of their species connected to the network. Elena checked her calculations. Based on Zephyrian population records, she had just killed approximately 2.7 trillion individuals. Elena sat in silence for a long moment. Then, she activated her long-range communicator and sent a message to human space. "This is Elena Vasquez," she said. "The Zephyrian threat has been eliminated. They will not trouble humanity again." Elena did not wait for a response. She gathered her personal belongings and prepared to leave the asteroid laboratory. She had work to do. There were other hostile species in the galaxy, other creatures that might threaten human families. Elena had proven that one determined human could destroy an entire civilization. She would not let anyone hurt human children again. Elena piloted her ship away from the asteroid and into the darkness between stars. Behind her, the laboratory's automated systems began to shut down and erase all evidence of what she had built there. Elena looked at the picture of Marcus, Sophia, and Maria one final time before sealing it away in her personal belongings. "It is done," she whispered. "They paid for what they did to you, all of them." Elena set course for the outer rim of the galaxy, where intelligence reports suggested other aggressive species were expanding toward human territory. Elena had become something new, something that had never existed before in the galaxy's history. She was a human who had lost everything and gained the power to destroy worlds in return. She was the monster that monsters feared, and she was just getting started. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Discovery, staring at the screens showing the Zephyrian fleet around Earth. The alien ships hung motionless in space like dead insects. For the past 6 hours, not a single Zephyrian vessel had moved or responded to any communication. "Status report," Chen ordered. "All Zephyrian ships are showing minimal power signatures," her tactical officer reported. "No weapons activity, no communication signals. It's like they all just stopped." Chen frowned. The Zephyrians had been winning the battle. Their harvesting beams had already begun targeting major cities on Earth. Then suddenly, they had simply ceased all activity. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a message. It's on a frequency we've never seen before." "Put it through." Elena Vasquez's voice filled the bridge. Chen recognized the name. Dr. Vasquez was the Zephyrian expert who had survived the Kepler 442c incident. "This is Elena Vasquez. The Zephyrian threat has been eliminated. They will not trouble humanity again." The message ended. Chen stared at the silent Zephyrian fleet and felt a chill run down her spine. "Send a boarding party to the nearest Zephyrian ship," Chen ordered. "I want to know what happened." 2 hours later, Chen received the boarding party's report. Every Zephyrian on every ship was dead. Their crystal bodies had crumbled to dust. The ships were still functional, but their crews had simply died. Chen ordered similar investigations across the entire Zephyrian fleet. The results were the same everywhere. Over 2 million Zephyrians dead, all at the same time. But that was just the beginning. Over the next few days, reports came in from across human space. Long-range sensors detected that Zephyrian worlds had gone silent. All of them. Every single Zephyrian planet in the galaxy had stopped transmitting. Human scout ships were sent to investigate. They found world after world covered in crystal dust. Zephyrian cities stood empty but intact. Their technology still functioned perfectly, but every living Zephyrian was gone. Chen read the reports in her office aboard the Discovery. According to the scout teams, the Zephyrians had died simultaneously across their entire empire. The timing matched exactly with Elena Vasquez's message. One woman had somehow killed an entire species that spanned 847 star systems. Chen activated her personal communicator and tried to contact Elena Vasquez, but the signal disappeared into empty space. Elena had vanished as completely as the Zephyrians. 3 months later, Chen sat in a conference room on Earth with the leaders of human space. The President, the Secretary of Defense, and the heads of all major colonies were present via hologram. "Need to discuss the Zephyrian situation," President Martinez said. And Dr. Elena Vasquez, General Harrison, who had worked with Elena for years, looked uncomfortable. "Elena always said she was studying Zephyrian weaknesses. I never imagined she meant something like this." "What exactly did she do?" asked the colonial administrator. From Alpha Centauri, Chen activated a holographic display showing Zephyrian space. "Based on our investigations, Elena planted some kind of biological weapon throughout their communication network. When she activated it, the weapon spread through their quantum entanglement system and killed every connected Zephyrian simultaneously. 2.7 trillion individuals," President Martinez said quietly. "Gone in a matter of minutes." The room fell silent. Finally, the Secretary of Defense spoke up. "Should we be celebrating? The Zephyrians were planning to harvest Earth. Elena saved us." "She committed genocide," said the colonial administrator, "on a scale never seen in galactic history." "The Zephyrians committed genocide on dozens of species," General Harrison replied. "They destroyed entire civilizations." Elena stopped them. Chen listened to the debate but said nothing. She had been thinking about Elena Vasquez for months. Elena had lost her family to the Zephyrians and spent 18 years planning her revenge. In the end, she had succeeded completely. But at what cost? "There's something else we need to consider," Chen finally said. "Elena Vasquez is still out there. She has the knowledge and technology to destroy entire species. What if she decides humanity has enemies that need to be eliminated?" The room grew quiet again. No one wanted to think about what Elena might do next. 6 months after the Zephyrian extinction, reports began coming in from the outer rim of human space. The Krillian Empire, an aggressive species that had been expanding toward human territory, had suddenly stopped all military activities. Human scouts investigated and found that the Krillians had suffered the same fate as the Zephyrians. Their entire species had died simultaneously, leaving behind empty worlds and intact technology. A week later, the same thing happened to the Vorthan Collective. Then the Crystal Singers. Then the Machine Kings. Each extinction followed the same pattern. Species that threatened human expansion would suddenly go silent. Scout ships would find their worlds empty but undamaged. Elena Vasquez never took credit for these extinctions. She never sent messages or made demands. But the pattern was clear. Someone was systematically eliminating threats to humanity. Admiral Chen began tracking the extinctions on a galactic map. There was definitely a pattern. Elena was working her way through every species that had shown aggression toward humans. Chen tried to imagine what Elena had become. A woman driven by grief and rage, armed with the knowledge to destroy civilizations. Elena was protecting humanity by becoming something humanity could never officially acknowledge. Chen received a coded message on her personal communicator. The sender was anonymous, but Chen recognized the encryption method Elena had used years ago. "The galaxy is becoming safer for human children," the message said. "That is all that matters." Chen stared at the message for a long time. Then she deleted it. Human expansion into the galaxy accelerated over the next few years. Species that had once blocked human colonization were gone. Their worlds were empty and ready for human settlement. The colonial authorities developed a policy of avoiding questions about why so many worlds had become available. They focused on the practical benefits. Humans could now expand freely without fear of aggressive alien interference. Some philosophers and ethicists wrote papers about the moral implications of the extinctions. They debated whether Elena was a hero or a monster, but their debates had no practical effect. The extinctions continued. Elena Vasquez became a ghost story that parents told their children. Some said she was still out there watching over human colonies. Others said she had died years ago, and the extinctions were caused by some weapon she had left behind. The truth was that no one knew where Elena was or what she planned to do next. Admiral Chen, now promoted to Fleet Admiral, received reports of Elena's activities for 15 more years. Always the same pattern. A threatening species would disappear overnight. Their worlds would be found empty but intact. Then suddenly, the extinction stopped. Chen waited for months, expecting news of another species going silent, but nothing happened. The galaxy remained peaceful. Human expansion continued unopposed. Chen began to wonder if Elena had finally finished her work, or if she had simply moved beyond the range of human sensors. One night, Chen sat in her office looking at star charts of human space. The map showed dozens of worlds that had once belonged to extinct alien species. Billions of humans now lived on those worlds, raising families, building cities, creating art. None of them knew that their peaceful lives were built on the graves of entire civilizations. Chen thought about Elena Vasquez, somewhere in the darkness between stars. Elena had lost her family to aliens who saw humans as nothing more than raw materials. In response, she had become something that no alien species could understand or fight. Elena had taught the galaxy a lesson that no one would ever forget. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was not raw material. Humanity was the species that would burn down the entire galaxy to protect a single human child. Chen received one final message from Elena, 20 years after the Zephyrian extinction. It was short and simple. The children are safe. My work is done. Chen never heard from Elena again. But sometimes, late at night, Chen would look at the stars and wonder if Elena was still out there, watching, waiting, ready to destroy anyone who threatened human families. The galaxy had learned to fear one name above all others: Elena Vasquez. The woman who had lost everything and made it everyone else's problem. Children across human space grew up hearing stories about the monster who protected them, the creature who loved them so much that she had become something inhuman to keep them safe. Elena Vasquez had proven something that no one in the galaxy had understood before. There was no limit to what a human would do for family. And in a galaxy full of predators that made humanity the most dangerous species of all,